The battle between good and evil seems to be escalating. It is easy to blame politicians, government, or poor leadership, but behind all of that is a spiritual battle. Pastor Alan Jackson's new book, Angels, Demons, and You, talk about the reality of this battle and the spiritual realm that exists around us. It has a real impact on us every day. As you read, you will discover that angels and demons are not imaginary, they actually exist. You can find them playing a variety of roles throughout the Bible, and they're still influencing the world today. We don't need to be afraid, but we do need to be aware and prepared. Angels, Demons, and You provides valuable insight, practical tools, and biblical truth to help you recognize the spiritual battle around us and become a difference maker in our generation. Get your copy today at alanjackson.com/angels. The next is the Pyramids of Giza. Is that right?
Yeah, we got into this. So, I mean, you guys can make the pitch to me what you think is going on here, because I think my take is not very surprising. But you guys have been sending it to me.
This has been setting the internet ablaze. Apparently, there's an entire city underneath the pyramids. Is that right?
It's not right.
It's not a city. The experts are speculating that it's a power grid.
Oh, a power grid. Okay.
It is.
It is. Okay.
It's the only thing that makes sense.
The only thing that makes sense.
It's the only thing that makes sense.
The only explanation.
I've watched at least 6 Instagram videos on this.
Or some kind of like power generator.
Yeah. There's a guy who wrote a book about this.
I'm sure they've written a lot of books about it.
We love Graham Hancock. I'm very pro Graham Hancock.
Yeah. So contextually, it's that this news story is. I think they're Italian. It's like academics in Italy, I believe, and they claim. I really cannot put enough quotation marks around the word claim that they've found using ground penetrating radar that there's some sort of tunnel or shaft extending beneath the pyramids thousands of feet. They believe a mile or more, I think.
It's like 150 stories.
And like they're atop these pillars. Yeah. And they just go down. And then they wildly speculate that they may lead to a lost ancient city.
So that's what Charlie's talking about.
And
there might be a city underneath the power grid.
Obviously.
And I mean, that's...
I am curious. So Blake, let's broaden this.
What was their morning routine?
What was the Egyptians' morning routine? So do you think the construction of the pyramids, do you think there was any like alien phenomenology behind the construction of any of these ancient structures?
Nah.
Do you think there's anything to the idea of how the pyramids are configured with like the gravitation, like the sun's orb? No?
You think it's all some mild astronomy stuff. I'll never forget.
You think it's just it's like a happy accident? All the astronomical.
I will never forget watching the History Channel once when it was converting to becoming the Aliens channel.
Correct.
And they had a program on the pyramids. And in passing, as evidence of the pyramids' mystical nature, they ponderously said, the pyramids of Giza lie at the exact intersection point where where the world's longest lines of longitude and latitude intersect. One, every single line of longitude is the exact same length because they all go from the North Pole to the South Pole. Two, the longest line of latitude is the equator. The pyramids are not on the equator. And they just threw this in, like someone had to edit together this documentary, which was then aired on cable television, just saying this extremely dumb thing. And the truth is like people want to believe weird stuff. There's always people looking to tell you weird stuff. It's very funny if you read old sci-fi stuff because there are alternative versions of this. I was just reading an essay in a online magazine in the 40s. The big fad was that like lost Lemuria. It was like Atlantis and Lemuria, and the people from there would like abduct humans and take them to their underground lair. And once they published this, which was just some rant by like a mentally ill guy who had lived in an asylum, they started getting all these letters from people saying like, yeah, I have memories of getting abducted by the ancient Lemurians too. This is crazy. And there was Amazing Tales was this big sci-fi magazine, and it just got taken over by the hunt for the Lemurians for about 5 years. And it made their sales go through the roof, which is why they did it. And it's the same thing with Egypt. Like people like pyramids. They're big. They're impressive. They're kind of strange. It's pretty baffling to have this extremely huge, extremely old structure. So people have always been coming up with strange theories about them. But to say the least, no, there is not a gigantic underground city beneath the pyramids. I'm willing to bet money that 5 years from now, we will not have found a vast underground city beneath the pyramids. You might find an underground chamber or something. Like, they have found stuff buried alongside the pyramids. I think my favorite that people don't know about is they built a giant boat for the pharaoh to use in the afterlife, and they dug it up and they reassembled the whole boat, and it's like a big old boat.
So you think all the alignment is either just happy accident, because they have like Orion's belt alignment, the solar equinox alignment.
Yeah, all that's usually just woo-woo.
What do you? But it's real. So is it just they would just happen to put the pyramids there?
Well, they have astronomy in ancient times, so they could conceivably be like, oh, we'll have the point of this pyramid line up with this star. And I don't know them off the top of my head, but no, there's nothing that would indicate they had, ancient telescopes or aliens telling them to point the
I'm
pyramids.
not saying there is. There's
And
something
keep in mind,
phenomenal.
After 5,000 years, the pyramid, like the stars, actually move. They shift where they are over 5,000 years.
There's something, and I'm drawing from memory here, but if you add up the coordinates of the pyramids, it has some sort of a alignment with the actual circumference of the Earth.
That is true. That is.
You've heard about this one? This one is a real thing.
I have heard about this one.
I'm drawing from memory.
I believe it's that the latitude. I'm looking at this. The latitude of the Great Pyramid is extremely close to the speed of light.
Yes.
But the problem there is, while that is a very wacky coincidence,
do you really think that is? I'm asking, is that just a coincidence?
Did they have lines of latitude with coordinates in ancient Egypt?
No, that's the point.
That's the whole point.
I guess so. We're alleging like time travel.
We're not alleging. No, we're asking. We're in pursuit of to explain.
I mean, there's a whole alien aspect of this that people always throw in with that. That's where I think that's what the insinuation is by a lot of the people.
Yeah, aliens, I guess. But
what do you have to say about, for example, some of the Mayan temples and Aztec temples that they didn't have the technology
And
to even
Chinese.
cut the rock the way that it was? I mean, we're talking about perfect cuts of 100-foot stone. How would that even be done?
Apparently, they
then?
did have the technology.
Well, tell
to do
me
it.
how.
I don't know how to quarry rock, but quarrying rock is a pretty ancient
Why,
technology. Like the
this
Greeks
is why
did
Blake's
it, the Romans did it.
This is why Blake's position is so problematic.
Oh,
is because if there's 1,000 feet of tubes underneath the pyramid, he can't actually just write it off.
I will say if there's a 2,000-foot shaft with pillars and a power grid underneath the pyramids, I will be extremely excited because it will mean our knowledge of the world is totally thrown out and we have to reassess everything. But I think that's the appeal of it for a lot of people. And I'll just say, like, a lot of people who fixate on this have fixated on every other thing that ever came up and it went absolutely nowhere. So if anyone wants to bet even odds that we won't have found,
betting. I just there in ancient civilizations, some of these structures defy some of our logic of what we knew existed at the time.
yeah, for sure. And
So
some
then
of
we
them
have
are
to ask, how did they build them?
for sure. Like some of them are very interesting. Göbekli Tepe, I think is the name of it, is this ancient structure in, I think, modern day Turkey. And it's like 10,000 years old. And
It's
so
the oldest city
it's
in the
way older than we thought. Like this is well into Neolithic period. And so you're thinking, okay, was this an actual city? Was this a site that like hunter-gatherers would use? Is agriculture a bit older than we thought? Because the thinking is this basically predates agriculture, which our normal theory is you start getting cities when you have organized agriculture. That's pretty interesting. But notably, it's like, okay, we have this kind of wacky thing, like a small structure. It's not on par with like a giant super city. I think the Great Pyramids are pretty interesting as is without needing a giant city underneath them.
I'm not even saying that. The city thing, I'm agnostic on.
No.
How did they cut the stone to make the pyramid?
I don't know off the top of my head. One crazy thing is, I
Egyptologists
know
disagree on that.
From
They
how
do
far
disagree.
away the stone was that they cut it.
there
The
is-
quarries were hundreds of miles away.
Yeah, there's a lot of debate over how they were able to drag it. I know one of the crazier theories, I don't know that many people believe this, but I think it is in theory possible. One guy thinks that they can actually basically like cast rock. Like they could basically do like a limestone cast for a lot of the stones that they used. And so you could basically build it in place. And I think he did technically prove it was possible. And they mostly say that is unlikely because we have no evidence that the Egyptians knew how to do this or ever thought it was possible. But that would be a very funny way that they could have done it. But I think the most common thesis is, in fact, in ancient Egypt, you basically had a slave state where everyone was owned by the pharaoh, and you did nothing but grow food, which was easy because the Nile floods every single year. And so for a third of the year, you plant, for a third of the year you harvest, and for a third of the year you go to church. And the way you go to church is you drag giant rocks to build them in a giant pile to honor the god king.
Do you think so? I'm going to ask you another one.
Sure.
Easter Island.
What about it? The heads?
Who built them and how'd they get there?
I believe the natives of Easter Island did it, and they got so wacky about it, they deforested their island and caused a collapse of their civilization.
Okay. So just to be clear, these like island people built like 50-foot, beautifully sculpted with what technology?
I mean, they don't look that
They're
pretty.
huge.
They're huge, but then they did deforest their island until they like collapsed their civilization. Do not
what
impugn.
they want you to
Do
believe.
not impugn like the complexity of the Polynesians though, because they're crazy impressive when you
They're
read
not
about
quite
what they
Polynesia.
Could do.
It's
Polynesia.
It's South America.
No, Polynesian is so you have Melanesians, you have Micronesians, and then you have Polynesians. And Polynesians are Tonga, Hawaii, Easter Island. Easter Island is like the far edge of where
Easter
they
Island
went.
is part of Chile.
It is, but it's Polynesians who settled it.
That's the hypothesis, the southern route hypothesis. That,
there are alternative
there's the
theories that
hypothesis
South
that
America settled the Pacific
had
Islands.
people who settled before North America.
Do you think the Easter Island one is really bizarre?
Yeah, I mean, if you read about Polynesians, what's really crazy, for example, think about this. If you only live on islands like this and you've never seen like a large amount of land, they had no concept of north and south, for example, north, south, east, west, because why would they? Mm-hmm. Their concept of directions was oceanward or inward, like towards the island. And like that was their orientation for directions. And think about how crazy that would make your like headspace for locations.
There is a Christian potential interpretation. I have a great book I want you to read, it's called When Giants Roam the Earth.
Oh boy.
It's a phenomenal book, which shows all how giants used to be super populated. You'll laugh. And there's tons of photos and like archaeological evidence. And it would be the Nephilim.
So the Nephilim built Easter Island?
I'm not saying they did, but there is a strange, you have to admit, a pattern of different civilizations that didn't know each other, of statues that look eerily similar, of structures that are at least a little bit above our comprehension.
Yeah.
I mean, Machu Picchu, the Aztec, the Teotihuacan, or whatever they call it.
Teotihuacan,
Right? Yeah. It's not as if it's impossible, but it's definitely like verging on, okay, these people would like barely figured out how to grow corn.
Corn is a demon, though, so
I know.
it gave them eldritch powers.
But there's a symmetry to these ancient civilizations, and then what do they all have in common? They all go like poof. They build these insane things, and they all pop.
Now, you want me to blow your mind? What if that's our civilization? We built some insane things, Charlie, and are we?
I could make an argument
hubris-
though that making the pyramids without electricity is like way more impressive than building the Empire State Building.
It might be. Like it actually is.
You know what I'm saying? Like,
No, it is whatever it is. Any theory of like how they built the pyramids is going to be insanely impressive, because if you just take the number of stones like they've calculated that are in the Great Pyramid, they have to slot one of those rocks, every one of which is like 100 tons or whatever, in place basically every 11 minutes nonstop for like 20 years to get it finished.
so the one that you mentioned really quick is the Göbekli Tepe, right? I was just diving into some of this. The statues there are eerily similar to that on Easter Island. You could roll your eyes all you want.
At that point,
Okay, fine. I mean,
people are getting they want to find connections. They'll be like, how did the Mayans and the Egyptians both build pyramids? Well,
no, that's not what
I
I'm saying.
kind of think like
That's
you
not what
know,
I'm
a
saying.
pyramid is a kind of natural shape to build something in. You know, goes towards a point that goes up to the sky, and
there is an architectural and structural breakthrough that all of these civilizations happen to simultaneously figure out
but not simultaneously, because
within a couple 1,000-year window.
Well, yeah, like
And then all of a sudden, poof, no one builds this stuff anymore.
And they're everywhere. They're
Yeah,
all
we
over
do.
the
We have
world.
one in Vegas.
They're all over the world.
But that's with. But
We have one in Memphis.
But then
That's
we had
a reproduction.
We had to basically
That's a-
restart.
That's a reproduction, and it didn't have a 1,000 or 100 stories of energy producing technology underneath it.
That's true.
So Jack,
doesn't
where
exist.
are you at on the Nephilim, Jack?
I think it's very interesting. I did a whole thing in when we went to Israel in 2022. We were driving around the Holy Land. We did a whole special podcast on all of this and how there's various theories about the Nephilim and pre-flood cultures, and that one of the ones that I really like is that various kings and tribes throughout the Old Testament were actually remnants of the Nephilim, and that God actually sent the flood to wipe out the main portion of the Nephilim, and that's so Goliath, the one that everybody knows, it was actually one of these sort of descendants of the Nephilim, or had, I don't know, you'd say Nephilese blood, and that's what made him so gigantic. So that obviously they had a demonic aspect to them, and so that when David slays Goliath, he's actually fighting this demonic influence that was not supposed to be inside in the world to begin with. I find it fascinating. I love that stuff.
So Blake, you just a normie. You just think it all is as we're told.
I think if the more we study it, the more shocking it would be if we were to discover something way out of line. What I like to say, I've been to Egypt. One thing I think a lot of people don't realize is, for the pyramids, for example, they can seem really weird if you think there's 3 pyramids and then nothing else like that was ever built anywhere else before. But if you go there, there's actually, first of all, we have the proto-pyramids that they started building before the great ones. So if you go to Saqqara, which is another necropolis they have the step pyramid. It's older, so it's kind of layers. It's more like a layer cake type look to it. And what's also funny is they apparently were originally building these out of bricks, and so they take the stone and they carve it into brick shapes to keep the shape looking right. And they build that, and then they build other proto-pyramids, and it all builds up to, okay, now let's actually build this huge Mondo pyramid. And if you go around Egypt, you can also find the pyramids that they screwed up. So there's one called the Bent Pyramid, where they were building it and then apparently realized this isn't going to look right, so they just kiboshed it, and it ends up looking like this weird mutant pyramid. And there's also some where they just totally screwed it up and the pyramid collapsed or got all goofed up. And once you find these things, it's much more understandable to think of this fits into a civilization that gradually developed this and had these false starts. But 4,000 years pass and people think, oh, there's just this crazy huge building in the middle of the desert that came out of nowhere. And very seriously, I think a lot of modern conspiracy theories develop this way too, where people forget all of the context that happens around things that help explain it. And so things seem less explicable to them. So, you're going to get a lot more conspiracy theories over time about the moon landing because people are going to forget, oh, wait, these are all the other space missions we did that built up to the moon landing. Here's all this other stuff that's proof it happens. And they just think, oh, wow, we just went and landed on the moon? That doesn't make a lot of sense. And I think that genuinely is where a lot of oddball takes, a very conspiratorial takes come from, is lack of wider context around things that allows you to misinterpret the stuff you do know.